Hey Reddit, I'm Chase, 26, and last week my dad called me out of nowhere asking for a huge favor. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but let me give you some context. My dad, the very same man who ditched me years ago, left me and my mom behind for his new family, barely kept in touch, and treated me like an afterthought while he played the perfect dad to his stepkids. Suddenly had the nerve to call me when he needed something. I could hardly believe it. It all started on an ordinary afternoon. I was lounging at home, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed a missed call from a number I hadn't seen in months. At first, I assumed it was just another scam attempt. But then, as I glanced at the caller ID, I saw the name Dad. I paused, staring at the screen, confused and skeptical. After all, this was the same man who only reached out when he needed something. I almost let the call go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me, so I answered. Chase, hey buddy. His voice came through way too cheerful, almost overly familiar, as if nothing had changed. I couldn't help but let out an exasperated sigh. Hey Dad, how have you been? I managed, though my tone was laced with disbelief. It had been years since he had ever asked about me, and here he was, sounding as if everything was perfectly normal. I didn't waste any time. What do you want? I demanded sharply. There was a long pause on the other end, filled only by a nervous chuckle. Come on, can't a father just check in on his son? He pleaded, his tone trying desperately to mask years of absence with a thin veneer of cheerfulness. I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly laughed. Where was all this energy when I was struggling? I snapped. I could hear him clearing his throat, as if preparing for the inevitable explanation. All right, you got me, he admitted, and then, almost as if reading from a script, he dropped the bomb. I need your help with something. It's about your stepsister. At that moment, I almost hung up. I already knew this wasn't going to be good. Let me give you the short version. After my parents divorced, my dad remarried unbelievably fast. Like, stupid fast. Within a year, he had a new wife, a whole new family, and a stepdaughter named Ashley. And what about me? I became nothing more than his past, the forgotten son, while he lavished all his attention, money, and praise on Ashley. He took her on lavish vacations, enrolled her in an expensive private school, and bragged to everyone about how she was the daughter he always wanted. That kind of favoritism stung more than I can say. So, when he told me that Ashley was struggling to find a job in her field and that maybe I could put in a good word, I almost laughed out loud. You're joking, right? I said flatly. Chase, listen, he began, clearly ignoring my tone of disbelief. I know you've been doing well. You have connections. If you could just help her out. His voice trailed off as if expecting me to cave in immediately. Where was this energy when I was struggling? I interrupted again, my voice rising. There was a heavy silence on the line before he managed to resign. Come on, son, don't be petty. I clenched my fists. Petty. You ignored me for years, treated me like I didn't exist, and now, suddenly, when your favorite child needs something, I'm supposed to be useful again. He tried to explain, Chase, it's not like that. It's exactly like that. You're misinterpreting everything. I was trying to be reasonable. But I wasn't having any of it. You tried to guilt-trip me, tried to pull the family help card, but I'm not falling for it, I snapped. I let him talk a little longer, allowing him to dig himself deeper into his own web of excuses, and then I hit him with the truth. Let me make this simple. You made your choice years ago. You chose them. You forgot about me. Now, I'm returning the favor. There was silence on the line, and then, almost inaudibly, he whispered, Chase, please. I couldn't help but smile at the absurdity. Good luck with that, Dad, I said, and then I hung up, blocked his number, and for the first time in years, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. But little did I know, that was just the beginning of a long, ugly saga. When I refused to help his precious stepdaughter, my dad lost his mind. He wasn't going to take no for an answer. After I hung up on him, I figured that was the end of it. He'd finally understand that I wasn't his personal safety net, that I wasn't about to fix his stepdaughter's problems after he spent years treating me like I didn't exist. But no, this man refused to let it go, and over the next few days, he proved just how desperate he really was. It all began with a series of texts. At first, his messages were oddly polite. "Dad, Chase, I know you're upset, but please just think about this. It's not a big deal, just one email, one introduction, that's all I'm asking." I ignored that first message, thinking it was just another attempt at manipulation. Soon enough, his tone changed, becoming pushier. "Chase, I don't understand why you're acting like this. It's just a favor, Dad. You're being childish. Ashley would do the same for you." I couldn't help but laugh at that one. Ashley, she wouldn't lift a finger to help me, and honestly, that was just fine. Unlike her, I didn't need Daddy's handouts to survive in this world. Then, as if the texts weren't enough, the calls started. At first, there were only a few, but then the calls multiplied into dozens. I ignored every single one. When I finally listened to the voicemails he left, I realized just how desperate he was. Voicemail after voicemail played out, each one more frantic than the last. "Chase, please call me back. I just want to talk. Son, I'm trying to be reasonable here. Just pick up the phone. You're being selfish. You have no idea how hard this has been for our family. You're going to regret this. One day you'll realize how cruel you're being." I rolled my eyes at each message because, of course, now I was the selfish one. Even though this was the same man who had abandoned me for years, ditched me for his new family, and now, because I was finally standing up for myself, was calling me the villain. I wasn't about to fall for it. Then came the day when Ashley decided to reach out to me. And that, I realized, was a big mistake. If I wasn't going to tolerate any more of my dad's guilt trips, I certainly wasn't going to take any from her either. Her very first message was a weak, almost pathetic attempt at normalcy. "Hey Chase, it's been a while. How have you been?" I stared at the screen in disbelief. This was the same girl who hadn't spoken to me in years, who treated me like a distant, forgotten cousin. And now, all of a sudden, she was trying to be friendly. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process the absurdity. But she wasn't finished. Not long after, she sent another message. "So, I heard from Dad that you're being kind of unfair about this whole job thing." I blinked and then laughed. Unfair? I thought to myself. This was a clear indication that she really had the nerve to expect something from me after all these years. I still didn't respond, and she persisted. "Look, I get it. You don't like our family, but please don't take that out on me." At that point, I had to respond. "Ashley, I never did anything to you," I typed. "Why are you being so difficult?" Her reply came swiftly. "It's just one favor. If you weren't so bitter, maybe you'd understand that." And there it was, the real Ashley emerging through the facade. I realized that neither of them ever intended to resolve anything. They simply wanted to use me as a tool, a backup plan to smooth over their own shortcomings. I took a deep breath and finally responded with all the pent-up frustration I had bottled up over the years. "You're right. You never did anything for me. You also never treated me like family. You never reached out, never cared about me. And now, suddenly when you need something, you act as if we're close. Get real, Ashley. I owe you nothing." I hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for a reply. But nothing came. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if that would be the end of it. Unfortunately, I was wrong. When people like them realize that you won't bend to their will, they don't give up easily, they escalate. The very next day, I received a call from my mom. Now, my mom is an angel. She raised me on her own after Dad left, working 2 jobs just to ensure we had a roof over our heads. When I saw her name pop up on my phone, I knew immediately that things had taken another turn for the worse. I answered the call, and sure enough, she sounded worried. "Chase, honey," she began gently. "I just got off the phone with your father." I could already tell from her tone that something was amiss. "He says you're being difficult, that you're refusing to help Ashley out of spite." I couldn't hide my irritation. "Mom, do you really believe that?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. There was a long silence, and then she softly replied, "No, I don't." I exhaled slowly, relieved that at least she saw through his manipulations. But then, hesitantly, she continued, "Chase, I'm not saying you have to help her. I don't want this to turn into something bigger. If you don't help, they're going to keep coming after you. Maybe it's easier to just do it and move on." I closed my eyes and let out a heavy sigh. I knew exactly what they wanted, to see me cave in, to make things easy for them. But I wasn't about to make their lives any easier. "Mom," I said quietly, "would you ever let someone treat you like garbage and then come crawling back only when they need something?" She paused, then let out a tired sigh. "No, I wouldn't." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Exactly, and I'm not doing it either." After a brief pause, her voice softened as she added, "You're stronger than I was with your father." I managed a small smile. "I learned from the best," I replied. She chuckled, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I finally realized that I hadn't lost a father. He had lost me, and that was entirely his problem, not mine. So, Reddit, if a toxic parent ever tries to treat you like a backup plan, if they forget you exist until they need something, make sure they understand that they lost you for good. And when they finally regret it, just smile, because by then, it'll be too damn late. After my dad's angry meltdown on the phone, I thought that was it. He'd finally exhausted his arsenal of guilt trips and manipulative tactics. I believed that by shutting him down, I had put an end to his schemes. But, as is often the case with narcissists, he wasn't ready to accept defeat. Instead, he escalated his efforts. Over the next few days, I was bombarded not only with more texts and calls, but with an onslaught of manipulative emails and messages from other family members who were now getting involved. One morning, I received a lengthy email, not from my dad, not from Ashley, but from his new wife, whose name was Marlene. The subject line read, "This is unacceptable." I hesitated before opening it, expecting another tirade filled with accusations and guilt. As I read the email, I couldn't help but laugh at the sheer audacity of it. Marlene wrote in a tone that was both condescending and self-righteous. "Chase, I have held my tongue long enough. I cannot sit by and watch you continue to mistreat this family. Your father has done everything he could to support you, and now when he needs you, you turn your back on him, and on Ashley. This is not how family acts. You are being selfish and immature. We have all been giving you time to process your feelings, but your behavior is completely out of line. I suggest you reconsider your attitude before you permanently ruin your relationship with your father. It would be a shame for you to lose your family over this." I read it twice, and then I laughed outright. Did she really believe that a few lines in an email could make me change years of pain and abandonment? I fired off a reply that was as cold as it was definitive. "Marlene, I think you're confused. I didn't lose my father. He left me. He started a new life and made it very clear that I wasn't part of it. Now, suddenly, when you all need something, I'm supposed to act like we're one big, happy family? Not happening. I don't know you, I don't know Ashley, and I certainly don't owe you any favors." I hit send and then blocked her email address along with Dad's number. I thought that would be the end of it. But, as is often the case with toxic people, when one door closes, another one opens. Within days, more family members began reaching out, each message more accusatory than the last. A cousin, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, called me completely confused. "Chase, what the hell is going on? I just got off the phone with your dad. He told me you abandoned him when he was struggling." I frowned deeply and replied, "What do you mean? Did he say anything about how he abandoned me first?" After a long silence, he muttered, "No." I couldn't help but laugh. "Figures," I said, my tone a mix of amusement and anger. My cousin sighed, "I just wanted to hear your side before I made any assumptions." I gave him the full story, explaining how Dad had spun a twisted version of events in an attempt to save face and ruin my reputation. It wasn't long before word got around that I had spoken out against his lies, and soon the extended family chat was ablaze with heated arguments. In a final, desperate move, I decided to set the record straight once and for all. I posted a long message in our family group chat. "Hey everyone, I'm hearing that there are some rumors circulating about me. Let's clear things up. Dad left me years ago for his new family, barely kept in touch, and treated me like an afterthought. Now, suddenly, when his stepdaughter needs help, I'm expected to reappear out of nowhere? When I said no, he called me ungrateful, tried to guilt-trip me, and even sent his wife and daughter to harass me. And when that didn't work, he started spreading lies. I'm done playing nice. If you believe his version, that's your problem. But if you actually want the truth, feel free to ask me directly. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Some family members backed off immediately, while others jumped into the fray with accusations and heated arguments. Aunt Karen wrote, "This is not how we handle family issues," while Uncle Dave added, "So your father abandoned you but now wants to act like he's the victim?" Cousin Sarah, who had always been a voice of reason, simply said, "I knew something was off about his story." The discord in the group chat was palpable, and it was clear that for the first time in a long time, people were beginning to see the truth. Of course, Dad wasn't going to let all this go without a fight. Not long after my post, I received yet another furious message from him. "Dad, you had no right to air our family business like that," he wrote. I shot back with unfiltered honesty. "Oh, you mean if it's family business, you lied about Dad and made me look bad? You did that yourself, Dad. You'll regret this." I ended the message with a final, cutting remark. "No, Dad, I think you're the one with regrets." After sending that, I blocked him for good. Over the following week, I began to see the consequences of his actions unfold. His lies, which he had so carefully crafted over the years, were starting to unravel. His extended family began questioning him openly, and even his in-laws, who had long supported him financially, started distancing themselves. Ashley, it turned out, was suffering the consequences too. She lost a few promising job opportunities because hiring managers were put off by the drama surrounding her family. The fallout was widespread, and it soon became clear that Dad had burned every bridge he had ever built. A few days later, my mom called me once again. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I smiled, a genuine smile that I hadn't felt in years. "Better than ever," I replied. She sighed in relief and said, "I know this has been a lot for you, Chase, but I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." I chuckled. I learned from the best. For the first time in what felt like forever, I experienced a profound sense of peace. I finally understood that I had never truly lost a father. Rather, he had lost me. And that, ultimately, was his problem, not mine. Yet, the saga didn't end there. Just when I thought I had closed the door on this painful chapter, Dad made one final, desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of control over my life. One morning, out of the blue, I answered a call from an unknown number. Half expecting it to be another guilt-laden voicemail, I was surprised when I heard his voice. Different this time, devoid of its usual anger and arrogance. There was only a heavy, defeated tone. "Chase," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing with uncertainty. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he muttered, "I screwed up." I raised an eyebrow. There were no apologies, no sweeping declarations of remorse, just a stark admission of failure. "No excuses, no blaming me," he continued in a measured tone that was entirely foreign to him. I listened intently, knowing that even if he was trying to make amends, I wasn't about to let him manipulate me again. "Tell me, Dad, what do you want from me now?" I asked. He hesitated, and that silence said more than any words could. Eventually, with a resigned sigh, he said, "I need help, Chase. I've lost everything." I couldn't help but smirk at the irony. The man who had spent years abandoning me, who had built his new life on my absence, was now admitting defeat. "Help with what?" I asked cautiously. There was a long pause before he replied, "Money." I laughed, incredulous. "You want money?" I repeated, disbelief heavy in my tone. "Yes," he finally managed to say. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate." I took a deep breath and, for the first time in years, felt no sympathy, no guilt, no obligation. "You made your choice a long time ago," I said softly. "You chose them over me. I'm not going to fund your mistakes." His voice faltered, and for a brief moment, I thought he might finally offer a genuine apology. Instead, he simply whispered, "Please." But that was all. I shook my head. "I don't have a father anymore," I said firmly. "You lost me a long time ago, and I don't owe you a damn thing." With that, I hung up, blocked his number, and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. That was the last time I ever heard from him. In the weeks that followed, the fallout of his actions became painfully clear. His marriage crumbled. Marlene eventually left him, and his in-laws, tired of his constant drama and lies, cut him off completely. Even Ashley's prospects dimmed further. Her reputation, already tarnished by the family scandal, suffered irreparable damage. I, on the other hand, began to rebuild my own life. I realized that in standing up for myself, I had not only reclaimed my dignity but had also set in motion a series of events that forced everyone around him to face the truth. One day, I received a call from a cousin who I barely knew. "Chase," he said hesitantly, "I've been hearing things about what really happened. I just wanted to know your side." I took a moment to collect my thoughts before explaining. "Listen, I'm not here to rehash old wounds. I'm simply telling the truth. Dad abandoned me for his new family. He treated me like an afterthought for years. And now, when he needed something, he expected me to drop everything and fix his mess." My cousin listened quietly, and although I could hear the shock in his voice, he didn't interrupt. That conversation was a turning point, a moment when I realized that I wasn't alone in my struggle, even if many had been too afraid to speak up before. The more I reflected on everything that had happened, the clearer it became. I was never meant to be a backup plan, a safety net for a man who had always put himself first. Every call, every text, every manipulative email was a reminder of how little I was valued until I became useful. And now, as I moved forward with my own life, I vowed that I would never allow anyone, especially not a toxic parent, to use me as a pawn in their self-serving games again. So, Reddit, if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, if a toxic parent tries to rewrite history or manipulate you into playing a role you never signed up for, remember this: you have the power to stand up for yourself. You have the right to say no without guilt, to block out the lies, and to move on with your life without being weighed down by the mistakes of others. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't letting go of the past, but accepting that some people are never going to change, no matter how much you wish they would. In the end, I learned a valuable lesson. I learned that true strength comes from within, from knowing your own worth and refusing to be dragged down by those who only value you when it's convenient for them. I learned that a parent who truly cares would never make you feel disposable. And most importantly, I learned that forgiveness is not about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of their mistakes. I'm sharing my story with you not to dwell on the past, but to offer hope and clarity to anyone who might be trapped in a similar cycle. It may seem impossible to break free from the manipulations of a narcissistic, toxic parent, but trust me when I say that liberation is on the other side of that decision. Embrace your worth, cut ties with those who try to diminish it, and remember that you have the right to live life on your own terms. As for my father, his world continued to crumble. The bridges he had so carefully built over the years turned to ash, and he was left to face the consequences of his choices alone. In his final attempts to regain control, he only proved to everyone, and more importantly to himself, that his arrogance and entitlement had finally destroyed everything he once held dear. Now, I move forward without the weight of his expectations. I build my own future, not defined by the actions of a man who never truly cared, but by my own resilience and determination. And while the scars of the past will always be a reminder of what I endured, they also serve as a testament to my strength and the freedom I've finally found. So, to anyone reading this who might be facing similar challenges, I offer a simple piece of advice. Never allow anyone to dictate your self-worth. Stand up, speak out, and remember that you are not defined by the mistakes or failures of others. You are defined by your own courage, your own actions, and your unwavering commitment to living life on your own terms. I hope my story can serve as a beacon for those who feel trapped or voiceless. Know that you are not alone, and that the truth, no matter how painful, will always have the power to set you free. And when you finally look back at all the years spent trying to earn the love and approval of someone who never truly cared, you'll see that the strength to walk away was always within you. That, dear Reddit, is my story. A story of abandonment, manipulation, and, ultimately, liberation. I share it with you in the hope that it inspires you to value yourself above all else, to never compromise your self-respect for the sake of someone who doesn't deserve it, and to always remember that when someone tries to use you as a crutch, you have every right to stand tall and say, "I'm done. I am Chase. I am free. And I am finally living life on my own terms."